Salam Media.
Still to come, we'll focus on a mosque in Egypt, in Cairo, in our mosques from around the world feature. We'll chat to Dr. Shakira Chunara in our champion spotting feature. I mean, she's just been pictured with the WHO head just a few days ago, but she's got a fascinating journey, which we'll talk about just now. Let's, however, get to what we call My First Ramadan. We speak to people who are observing either their first Ramadan now or maybe the first Ramadan 20, 30 years ago, whenever it is. Because I thought, like, hold it, that story of their very first Ramadan must be a fascinating one to tell. So let's get the thoughts of someone I've chatted to so often about all other things in the world besides my first Ramadan, and that's Thembisa Fakude. Appreciate your time, Thembisa. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
All right, so we're not going to talk about geopolitics in the world. We're going to talk about Thembisa Fakude, right? Tell me about your first Ramadan.
My first Ramadan or this Ramadan?
Well, no, your very first. Well, yeah.
Well, my very first Ramadan was in 1992, and it was a nice Ramadan because it was a group of us in the township. So, quite an experience because we used to have a lot of free food from Lenasia coming in, and we used to look forward to that to the start. And so it was quite a helpful Ramadan, and people like Yusuf Saluji were very instrumental those days in my life. I used to meet with them often and share a lot of stories and read the Quran and try and understand the Sunnah and politics in general of Muslim world. So that was my first Ramadan. It was in Kimbrel, in Soweto.
Okay.
And the person I remember vividly was Yusuf Saluji, Dr. Yusuf Saluji.
Yeah, of course. I mean, and he's done great work, I think, in the health services space. Absolutely. What were interesting. Your first reaction to your first Ramadan was the chow, right? The food that you received. But I mean, clearly there were more challenges than that in observing your very first Ramadan.
I hate to say this, but Ramadan is not that difficult to many Africans, particularly those who grew up in the township, because we have 3 meals often. And me being a guy from boarding school, I was used to 2 meals sometimes. So it wasn't that hard. And for many people as well, it wasn't that difficult because, as you know, for some of us are privileged, we eat whenever we want. But for other people, they eat when necessary and when food is around. So we were surrounded by a lot of those people. So there wasn't much of, it wasn't that difficult in terms of hunger pangs and thirst. But I think what was important was just the family feeling, not necessarily my immediate family, but the family that we've created within the township, within our brothers and sisters there. It was an amazing form of camaraderie to be together and breaking fast together, and of course being introduced to Indo-Pak food, which is something that we didn't really have much. So we were breaking our fast with all the biryani, as you imagine, and samosas.
Well, there you are.
Now people are talking about going back to our own staple and traditional foods and breaking our fast, because we all thought that it was sunnah actually to eat a samosa and a date and curry. We did not really necessarily understand that the dates were eaten by Muhammad because there was nothing else.
Yeah,
and samosas are eaten by most of our colleagues and brothers in Islam in South Africa because it's their traditional food. So we thought it was religious.
Oh, that is such a fascinating story, and I think you're right. It depends which sort of cultures you grow up in. So you go to, you go to Qatar, you go to Turkey, you go to Malaysia, or maybe say Ghana. You have a different diet, and they would break fast with different things. Absolutely right. But you're probably right about the food stuff. I mean, I was in India recently, and the one thing I told my wife, I said, I must say, we can have this long debate about all good things India and all bad things India, but one thing, the chow from India is really lacquer. So I think the point is well taken, right? You mentioned.
I agree with you.
Yeah. Very much so. Now you spoke about this group coming together in Pimville. Was it a planned coming together of a group, or that just happened by chance?
It was a planned one because it was organized by Suleiman Shabangu, who was instrumental in introducing most of us to Islam. So we used to gather at his house. And that's where all the big decks and the sinkers were delivered for iftar. So it was a planned one, and as I said earlier, it was people such as Dr. Saluji and his brother Ahmed Saluji who used to take all the trouble of making sure that they come and they deliver. But it was not just food; they used to bring books, and we'll have discussions about Islam and politics. So it was that which enabled us to grow in Islam, alhamdulillah.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. Which obviously gets me to ask this question. Yeah. So what happened to you? How did you get drawn into this faith? What happened to you?
Well, I was religious, so I come from a very strong Christian family. And by the way, I was the chairperson at school. I was the chairperson of student Christian movement. So I was quite religious. But at the same time, you're looking for alternatives, something much more aggressive. I'm not saying Islam was, but or is. I started reading a lot about the revolution in 1980. And for me, it represented exactly what I wanted. I didn't become Shia, but at least it was some sort of inspiration. And Islam had both. Islam had both activism and spirituality, and that's what actually attracted me to Islam. And it became much more easier for me because I became a good boy, and my mom did not mind.
Well, that's so fascinating. And then, and was there that moment? I mean, so one is doing research and understanding what drives, peoples and families and communities, but the other is like making that decision to say, you know what, this faith, never mind what I headed up at university, this faith or at school, this faith is the faith I'm going to adopt now because of X, Y, Z. When did that moment come to fore for you?
Well, it actually, Hidayah is something else. I spent time with people such as John Esposito. John Esposito wrote the whole volume on Islam, encyclopedia on Islam, and yet he remains non-Muslim. And for me, it was a different case because the spirituality was already there. So I only had to convert certain practices, but it was not about the belief in Allah. I just, had to call God Allah, and then I had to pray in a different way. But spirituality and belief and the Iman was in existence. What got me more attracted to the religion was the actual practice. Whereas other people come from a place of total, a non-religious environment. They first have to believe, which it was not the case with me, and then embrace the way of life. So I think for me, the work was cut short because that demand part was there.
Mm.
Just had to change. By the way, there are not big differences in terms of practices. So I just had to change the way I practice, the way I pray, the discipline, and all others that goes with it. And that's how I ended up where I am now.
Okay, but you also said that, I mean, you were drawn to how people then, whether it's how they practice the Islam or how they live the Islam. What was it that then attracted your attention besides the revolutionary fervors you spoke about, in the 1980s?
Well, luckily I didn't meet Muslims, general Muslims, before I met Islam. I'm not quite sure if I would have been a Muslim had I met Muslims before Islam. But alhamdulillah, I met Islam through good people, people who cared, people such as Suleiman Shabangu, Dr. Yusuf Saruji, Naim Jina, Wada Khanfar, and others who actually gave me their after token. I must never forget, to remain my closest relative and acted as a father to me since my dad passed away. So all of those people played a very important role in my life. And I think it was their, conviction and teaching that actually assisted me much because they didn't teach me the actual religion, but I observed from them. So they brought me into their homes and lives, and they did, yeah, they did talk about Islam, but often it was the lifestyle that I was observing,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
was
yeah.
more convincing to me.
Yeah, and then when you finally then as you said, you sort of you tweaked what you were doing before and tweaked it to an Islamic leaning. From then on, 1992 to now, what impact has that had on your broader family and your broader community?
Oh, totally. I mean, it changed my life completely and completely in terms of career, in terms of exposure, travel the world, seeing and met amazing individuals because of Islam. I had an opportunities that many people who were born Muslims haven't had, alhamdulillah. Visited all the harams more than once. So it has actually changed my life. I mean, as you know, Ashraf, I've met you amongst others. So it's been a fruitful journey. My kids are Muslim. I have a granddaughter now. Her name is Lamis. She's born Muslim. That's again very. My kids were born Muslim, by the way, which
Hmm.
means therefore that I have a second generation Muslim. I have a son-in-law who's a Muslim. I have, as I said, the granddaughter who's a Muslim. So from me onwards, it's all Islam, which is something with that when you sit and you look at it and think about, especially during this Ramadan, when you start seeing this automatic reaction to Islam and all the principles that come with it from my children who know nothing else except Islam, is quite something to be grateful of, because for them is they don't know anything else except Islam. So they behave, speak, eat, do all the things that I had to learn. Now I am learning from them because I had a chance to go to proper, formal schooling on other issues of Islam. So they've been to half, been up to madrasa, and as a result, they know things that I wouldn't have known.
Yeah.
So yeah, it changed my entire life.
Well, and certainly I've been privileged to observe the changes of your life, and obviously privileged to know you on a very personal basis. So I'm richer for that, Alhamdulillah. But you also made the point about Hidayat comes from Allah. You have no idea when it comes and why it comes, but it gets to you, and it does take over your life. Perhaps the last thing, and this is not part of the script, right? Um, often there's talk that in many African countries there are large populations of Muslims, right? In fact, South Africa is one of the absolute minorities, right? There's always been talk about the growth of Islam. So, your example, it's now 3 generations. There could well be others, but what's your thoughts on the growth of Islam amongst the masses of South Africa? I mean, where are we at?
I think we're growing, but there's also an element of pan-Islam that's proliferating. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but that, for me, to an extent, presents a certain challenge. So there is growth of Islam, but you have a much more, and I've written about this, the Afro-Muslim culture that's emerging, and it's emerging because there is this rejection of the Indo-Pak Islam, and to an extent, you sometimes detect a bit of animosity because South African black Muslims feel they are marginalized, and as a result, they are moving closer and closer to their brethren, in other words, black brethren, and that, to an extent, I see it creating some sort of challenge, and something that we need to encourage in terms of the diversity of Islam, but it must not go to an extent where we conflict on minor issues. We need to close ranks when necessary and remain a Muslim ummah. But notwithstanding that Islam is growing in South Africa, I'm just concerned about the polarization of our community because of certain socio-political differences.
And perhaps therein lies the challenge for yourself. Maybe the next big challenge is someone who unlike many others, your life now is not just from one community, not just from Pimble or Soweto, but is around the world. So you have a complete global view, and you understand the challenges of holding on to culture and holding on to faith, and some parts of your culture can be used, others not, and how does all that integrate into this greater ummah called Muslim or Islam, right? And perhaps therefore the challenge is for someone like yourself to play that sort of leadership role of being, what is it, the cement that holds it all together.
Yeah, I think there's a role to play, of course, but we need more people like those. People I've mentioned earlier, people such as Dr. Yusuf Saluji, Naim Jinnah, Akhtar and others, and yourself, Afshaf, because what helped me more than anything else is that I observed. So it was not an academic learning or understanding of Islam, which I then had to practice. So I was entrenched, luckily, alhamdulillah, within the society and the community. So I was eating in these people's houses, sleeping, traveling with their kids. So I was part and parcel, particularly after Token. I mean, I spent most of my time at his place, whether visiting some of his nephews and eating at the place. So that helped a lot because it kind of removes all of these stereotypes about what these people are all about. And then, more than anything else, you get to understand Islam proper. I mean, I remember my wife struggling at some point with tying off the scarf. But because she was entrenched within the community, it became so much easier for her. So we could observe Islam. And I think what has happened in the past is that we do give dawah and we teach Islam, but we don't leave and spend time with people who come to Islam. And that then creates a problem. So
well, I'll tell you what, I'll end. Yeah, I'll end with this. I mean, we spoke to a young lady from Denmark, probably in the very my first Ramadan feature we did on day one of Ramadan, and she said, people don't realize that for the majority of people who are non-Muslims, they don't read the Quran; they see the Quran in the way others live the Quran. And I think it is such a telling statement that she made as a 23-year-old, right?
No, that's very true. By and large, you see, and you want. I mean, that's what attracted me to Islam. I mean, amongst others, is you see and you appreciate and you want to be. And when I became a Muslim, I then started spending time with. I had a lot of friends. Mohammed Nanabai, Zahid Khan, and others, and most of them were not married at the time. And I appreciate the way and the process of them getting married. And how they avoided certain things before they get married. Certain things that I was exposed to in the township, which I then started regretting. Now, you'll never understand that until you spend time within the community. And so I do insist that, at this point in my life, I would like to embrace and adopt certain young Muslims or Muslims who are new to Islam and make friends with them so that they can see how it's done. And that's how facilitated my current situation, career, and normal life is because I had a chance, alhamdulillah, of spending time with Muslims, not just reading the Quran away from home, but I had a chance to be with Muslims, and that made a big difference.
Well, I'll tell you what, that challenge of you want to effectively adopt or mentor others who are new to Islam and put them under your wing, I think I'm going to give you a whole long list of people. I'm going to pass them your way. So appreciate your time. Hidayah comes from Allah, and alhamdulillah, it arrived on your doorstep in 1992, which I think is a significant time in South Africa, considering Mandela being released in 1990 and all that happened in those 4 years and beyond. So for you, also a hugely symbolic shift in your life. You truly did cross the Rubicon. Alhamdulillah. Thembisa Fakude, appreciate your time, and I wish you well for the remainder of Ramadan.
Shukran. Assalamu alaikum.
There we are. Thembisa Fakude had done many things. In fact, the bureau chief at one stage of Al Jazeera as well. So, you need to Google him. He's got a fascinating story indeed. And so has Dr. Shakira Chunara. We'll get to her in a moment.
Salam Media.